Hello, writers, and welcome to the Researchers Writing Podcast. This podcast is for all your researchers in the sciences who want to write papers in a structured and time efficient way so you can get published in top tier journals at a calm and steady pace. In this podcast, we talk about how we can write papers that are clear, concise, and compelling, and how to make the process of writing less hard. My name is Dr. Anna Clemens, and I am an academic writing coach with a PhD in chemistry. In the Researchers Writing Academy, my online program, I've helped hundreds of researchers get their papers published in their target journals using a streamlined writing process. If you want to succeed in your academic career, mentor your students effectively, and have your research make an impact in the world, you are in the right place. Let's get into it. Hello, writers. Well, welcome back to the Researchers Writing Podcast. I want to talk to you about today one of my favorite topics, which is writing scientific papers time efficiently. I see a lot of researchers are struggling with the writing process. That's like the most common thing that researchers mention to me when they join, like as the motivation as to why they have joined the Researchers Writing Academy. And just like, talking to researchers, seeing what gets posted on social media, I just see that this is like such a big issue, such a big struggle. And I think one of the biggest struggles, or let's go through the struggles actually. Let's go through um, what do researchers commonly struggle with, and you may maybe recognize your own struggles in that as well. So I think one of the big things is not knowing where to start. So you kind of know, okay, I have to write this research paper, but this is like a huge project. What is step number one? Like, what is the best thing to do first? And I think there's like some like common wisdom or like things that I hear researchers say a lot with what the task they are starting to write a paper with. And I think the most common ones I hear is, well, first, like writing an abstract or making the figures first or writing the materials and methods section first. I'm actually not a fan of any of these as the first step. Um, and I'll explain why in a bit. Um, but another big struggle is procrastination. And I think procrastination really comes from like procrastination is, I mean, I guess everyone knows what it is. Most of us experience this when we like when we know we should do a task and we just don't do it and we do other things instead of doing the task we should do. And I think when it comes to writing a paper, I think it most often stems from this like being unsure what the exact steps are. And when you not know, okay, what is the first step? What is the next step? Like, what should I do now? When you keep like second guessing yourself, um, and also when you have like a low confidence about what you're writing and about like how you're structuring the writing process, then I think that often leads to procrastination because you go, okay, well, I'm not really sure about this. Maybe I'm investing my time wrong when I do this. And then you're like, oh, that feels really uncomfortable because I feel like I'm not doing this efficiently. So then instead of doing it inefficiently, we often opt for, well, let's not do it now. And this is a process that is like not conscious, right? But this is what also observing myself, I've often found like whenever there's like ambiguity about like what is the next step, I get really I get really prone to procrastination. All right. Um, Also, I think another big like struggle, another big problem I see in the writing process of writing a scientific paper is that often it's a very inefficient process for a lot of researchers because they have so much back and forth with their co-authors on an already completed draft. So an already completed draft is being edited, changed, rewritten, like in several rounds. Um, Actually, one of our alumna, Gia, who used to be a member of the Researchers Writing Academy, she called this like, oh, this was like an editing nightmare. I used to have this like editing nightmare with my co-authors. Um, and it's like frustrating. Like if you've ever been through this, it's mega frustrating. It's time consuming. Papers are slow to get out. Um, I hear from a lot of PhD students how this like really demotivates them. Like just seeing um the whole back and forth, seeing a draft being completely ripped apart. Um, throughout the process where at the end they feel like, okay, is this even my paper still? Like this is like a super common thing I hear. And maybe at the end you can't even stand your paper anymore. Like you almost don't even care anymore. You just want it out. And this is really what I don't think this is ideal, right? This is not an ideal scenario. And also it really doesn't have to be this way. Like this has been so normalized, I think, but it doesn't have to be this way. Like there is a better way. I think in my opinion, a lot of time is being wasted writing papers, and writing papers is hard. Writing papers is a lot of work, but it's not as time consuming as it is often in reality these days. And I developed a process for this, for writing research papers time efficiently in a structured way. And this is the process I teach in the Researchers Writing Academy, my program. And the process I call the journal publication formula. Now, some people have a problem with the word formula because they're like, well, there's not like, how can you say like there's a formula? Like, surely there isn't like a secret formula. But I think it really all boils down to those 4 steps that I want to walk you through today. That if you follow them, it is like a formula. Of course, the way you fill these steps, um, it's different, right? With your paper, the paper that you're writing with your research. But I do think in almost all cases, um, you can follow this process or this formula, and it works really, really well. All right, well, ideally, you implement the process with your whole co-author team. Like this is when it is the most efficient, the most useful. But even if it's just you as the lead author, and knowing the process, you can really win a lot of time by directing the effort. So you are directing your co-author team as to like what the steps are and what they are supposed to do. That already makes a huge difference. And actually, this is something our members have been saying as well. Again, Gia, who I just mentioned, but also Katja, who have both been members of the Researchers Writing Academy, they both mentioned to me how when they stepped into this leader role, where they gave clear instructions to their co-authors, hey, this is what the process is. Please give me feedback on this. They were very specific, like what the next step in the process is. And that has worked really well for both of them. And actually, the co-authors thanked them for it. Like they were relieved themselves that somebody took charge and that they were guided through the process and they felt, wow, okay, this is actually way more efficient. Um, of course, this is always easiest when you are the PI, the principal investigator. We've had a member in the academy called Toyosi who actually changed, who is a PI, who changed the process for her whole lab. And she's really like told me how, like she wrote me emails saying how amazing it is having this process more efficient now. Let me give you an overview now of this efficient paper writing process. The first step is developing the story. Second step is outlining for flow. Third step is writing clearly and concisely. Fourth step is packaging for publication. Now, the biggest difference to how papers are normally written to this process is that a lot of the work happens before we actually like quote unquote write the paper. And with write now, I mean typing full sentences, right? Like this is what I often see happening. Researchers go open Word or open LaTeX or open Scrivener, whatever they're using, and like typing out full sentences. And starting to like count words and being like, oh, I made so much progress on my paper today. I wrote X many words. And actually, this is not what I suggest doing. So this process really, the biggest difference is you do a lot of pre-work before you actually write, type words and sentences. All right, let's go through each part. The first part is developing the story. And we'll talk more about storytelling in a different episode, don't worry. But if you want your paper to tell a story, I'd highly recommend you to do that. You should absolutely have your writing process start with this crafting your story step. Because if you just like think about the story that your paper that you want your paper to tell in a later stage of the writing process, your story will just be incoherent. I see this all the time when papers are telling not one coherent story, but like multiple stories, or you aren't even quite clear what is the story of your paper, like what is the biggest thing this paper is telling me. I think this is super, I've seen this a lot. It's a super common comment from peer reviewers, actually. Like, start paying attention to that. Whenever you get a peer review comment that is a bit confused about, okay, what is it actually you're telling me? Like, what is the big takeaway? Either they're asking the question or they're assuming something that actually isn't the takeaway that you want them to go away with. That's a huge indicator that you're not telling a coherent story, one coherent story throughout your paper. And I also, the reason why we want to do the story development in the first step is because a lot of researchers don't realize this, but your story affects every paragraph, like every sentence, almost every word of your paper. So it really like doesn't make sense to develop this later, because that just leads to, oh, you have to rewrite all of that, right? Because if you've already written words, and then you're like, oh, my story is this, and this actually doesn't fit in my story, you just end up deleting things you've already written. So yeah, it's inefficient, not thinking about story as the first step. And well, what is part of developing your story then? Well, it is defining your audience, and your audience is your readership, who's going to read the paper, aka what's your target journal? Yes, you have to do this now. Like, this is the time where you think about, what does the journal want to submit this to? Also, storyboarding. What's the order in which I present my results? Which like visual elements do I want to be part of this paper? Which figures, tables, other graphics? How do I want to construct my argument? What's the biggest takeaway of my paper? It's also about actually introducing tension into your manuscript. So what is the specific problem you're solving? The whole storytelling part, this is something we go through in depth in the Researchers Writing Academy, and we'll also have a separate episode on this in the future. What is really important is that once you have your story, once you know what story you want to tell in your manuscript, make sure you and your co-authors all agree on this. Like, don't proceed to the next step before you have agreement from everyone. I highly, highly, highly recommend have a meeting with them before you continue. Next step, outlining for flow. This is the very best way to get around this like blank page syndrome, because once you have an outline, super easy to write your paper. Like, because you don't confuse perfecting sentences with structuring your paper if you have that outline first. So what I see happen a lot is that researchers edit and rewrite sentences only then to notice later, wow, it makes actually sense to kill that whole paragraph. So you've just wasted so much time perfecting and editing. And okay, you go like, okay, actually, I didn't need this. So once you have your story, I highly recommend you make a good outline, a very specific, like detailed outline for each of your sections. So introduction section, results section, discussion section, whatever section is part of your paper. These are like the most common ones. You want to specify, okay, do you have any subsections within these? Like the results section sometimes can have several subsections. The introduction section can have subsections. In some fields, you would have like a separate literature review, for example, things like that. And you will want to think through, okay, what are the titles of these subsections? You want to think through, okay, how many paragraphs, which paragraphs will I have in each section? And what information do I want to convey in each paragraph? And which studies, if any, do I want to cite in each paragraph? Like, this is exactly as much work as it sounds. It's a lot. Like, this is a lot of work, but the beauty is you're not writing. Like, you're not typing full sentences. So you're thinking about structure right now. And whew, this sounds maybe easy when you listen to it. You're like, yeah, okay, and I can do that. The thing is, actually, I just want to warn you because it actually does feel a little uncomfortable if you're not used to doing it this way. Doing step 1 and 2 is a lot of like pre-work that you're doing before you're actually writing. So I mentioned this before, but if you're used to counting your writing progress in like, oh, I've written so many words today in my manuscript, you may be a little disappointed. Like that just doesn't work. Like measuring with this metric just doesn't work anymore if you follow the journal publication formula, this process I'm just walking you through, because it's not about how many words you're putting on paper. This is about creating an outline, crafting a story. Like, yeah, it feels uncomfortable. And I think it's good to know this. And when you recognize this, don't like, it's okay. It's okay for this to feel uncomfortable at first. And just as you do it, like the first time will be the hardest, but as you keep going through this process, as you see the success you're having with this process, the easier it gets. And seeing others also having success with this helps. Just like trusting the process a little bit more. I guess what I'm asking you is the first time, trust me. And if it feels uncomfortable, just know I warned you, it does feel uncomfortable, and still highly encourage you to go through with that. All right. Second step was outlining, right? So again, highly recommend agreeing with your co-authors on your outlines for each section before you proceed with step number 3. And if one of your co-authors is writing a section or paragraph, I mean, this is quite common, right? That you kind of divide the paper up. Oh, you're doing this paragraph, you're doing this subsection, you're doing that section. Also ask them to make an outline first before they start writing. And you can even show them your outline as an example. So you can create the outline for the section that you are like signed up for. So then they see, okay, this is, and you're just explaining, ideally before you start writing the paper, you're explaining, okay, I want to do it this way. This is what it looks like. I'm doing, yeah. You just show them, okay, this is what my outline looks like. And you're just asking them, hey, could you do the same for you? And you explain why this will save time, why this will save all of your time. Do you find yourself feeling scatterbrained when you're writing a paper? If actually you've never been taught how to write a paper, the learning curve to know how to best structure the flow of your paper is hard. But that's why I created a free training video for you. Just go to researcherswritingpodcast.com/free and have me walk you through how you can become a more efficient writer so you can consistently publish your manuscript. That's researcherswritingpodcast.com/free. Okay, let's get back to the episode. Next step, finally, we are in the writing step. So I call step number 3 writing clearly and concisely. So the beauty is of this is we don't have to think about structure anymore. Now it's all our focus is on writing. Um, I think as you're writing, and writing then just becomes basically filling in the gaps. Like you have your outline and you're just turning your notes, your bullet points into sentences. This is honestly relatively easy compared to just writing from scratch without having an outline first. Um, and I think as you are in this writing step, what I think is very effective is to read through what you wrote the day before at the beginning of your writing session or what you wrote in your last writing session. So you read through it, you some things may stand out to you, you make some quick edits, but don't overthink it. Like this shouldn't be a big editing session, if that makes sense. So really try to stop you from perfecting, because I'm going to talk about editing in just a little bit. Just read through, just see, okay, it's things that stand out to you. And this way, you're always like, first of all, it's a bit of a warm up before you start writing. I think it's an amazing warm up to like do some editing first, because this tends to be a little easier, and then to write the new stuff. Also, you just keep editing a little bit as you go, right? As you're writing, you always make sure there's like already one pass, like one editing pass through. So you've maybe caught the like biggest things already. All right. Also in this step, you want to make your final figures. So I mentioned earlier, didn't recommend making the figures first, because the reason for this is that um, there's often so much back and forth on the figures. So if you make like final versions already, it's just waste of time. Like again, you're perfecting things in the figure, you're choosing colors, you're moving things. Like making figures is so much work, so time consuming. Like don't do this as the first step, but rather in the story, developing your story step, make like rough sketches. These can even be done by hand, of your figures, instead of making the final figures. So now in this third step, this is this is the time when you do make final figures. Once your co-authors have agreed, right, what should be in the figures. And this you've already done in step number 1. All right. Now, also actually tables. I've just said only figures, but this also applies to tables in the same way. Any kind of visual element in your in your paper. Okay, so once you've written every section in your paper, I highly, highly recommend let your draft sit for a week without that you look at it. Try to forget it a little bit, like get busy with other things. I highly recommend planning in a way that you have this week. I know it's not always possible, like this is the ideal. If it's only a weekend, that's fine too. Just make sure you need at least 1 or 2 days where you're not thinking about the paper, but like a week is ideal, I think. Because then you allow yourself to look at it with fresh eyes again. And I think this is so, so important. Um, all right. Then what I suggest is a 4-step self-editing process. In your first run through, in your first self-editing step, you want to check that the story is coherent and that everything in your paper is related to that story arc that you came up with. Otherwise, you remove that. Okay, in your second step, this is where you look at your paragraphs and your flow. So you look at, okay, is the length of each paragraph adequate, or do I have like a really long one? Then you need to do something about that. Split that up. You want to check, is each paragraph coherent? Like, does the information within that paragraph logically connect? And actually, do the paragraphs in one section logically connect with each other? Or maybe is there some need for some rearranging? Like sometimes we can't foresee all of the structural things in the outlining step, but once we've written everything, this is where it might become apparent, okay, actually, this makes more sense here, and this is totally fine, right? Like it's still a little iterative. Then in the third step, so this is a third pass through the manuscript, um, you look at the sentence level. So you check, okay, are the sentences at adequate length? Are there any clutter words? Any sentences that you can cut completely, maybe? Is there a way that you can just distill information further? So maybe you have two sentences that are kind of trying to get to a point, but there's actually a way to get to the point quicker with just one sentence. Then do that. Um, are there any clunky phrases, any like in specific phrases? Like, could you be more clear? Could you be more clear and concise in any way? So that's the third run through. Now, the fourth run through is formatting. Um, you want to check, is everything within word limit? Like check the author guidelines again. Also figures and figure captions, like are they within the limits, within the specifications by a target journal? You also want to check your references. Are they according to guidelines? You want to check author names, author affiliations, these kind of things. So essentially, I'm suggesting 4 run-throughs where you put on a different pair of glasses each time. And again, this is hard to do when you do it the first time, but the more you get used to this, the easier it will get to keep you from like working with something else. You could even use different colors for each step. So different colors when you edit things. Um, just for your brain to know, okay, I'm doing this now. This is my task now. When you're looking at, let's say, the story step, right, you're not going and deleting single words. That would be more the like more the thing that you would do in step 3. All right. Actually, when you ask authors for feedback, this self-editing framework is something you can use as well for that. So you can use that to specify what kind of feedback you want from them. Like you may want to have feedback on the story. So you can say, hey, could you have a look at this section, but please only look at the story. And then you explain exactly what you want them to look out for. Just specify, okay, don't look at grammar right now. Don't look at phrasing right now. Just look at the story. Okay, finally, the final kind of sub-step of this step is proofreading. So you do want to go through, again, if you can have time between that step and the self-editing would be great. Like have a day or two or a week. I know this is probably unrealistic, but if you can have time between that, great. And then do a final read through. And then that read through, you check like, okay, is there like a comma that needs to be somewhere else? You might find typos, things like that. Oh, did you introduce some mistakes maybe at some level? Yeah, that's step number 3. Of course, big step as we're writing. But the good thing is step 4, packaging for publication is a super quick step. In packaging for publication, we are writing the title, the abstract, and the cover letter. These are super easy to write because we've already developed the story before, and I'm essentially suggesting that you tell the story in these 3 parts of your paper. So in the title, you want to have your main takeaway. The abstract should tell the whole story, and your cover letter should also essentially tell your story with a bit more supporting context and information. The cover letter is your direct channel to your editor, to your journal editor, so you can use that to convey some other things that may have been a little bit harder to convey in a paper. Whew, yeah. This step's super fast. If you have done the story development, you're just plugging in your story into these. In the Researchers Writing Academy, we do have templates for these to make it even faster. But honestly, this is probably a matter of an hour, and I'm not lying. Like this step is super, super fast. That's the beauty of front loading the work. Like the later steps become easier. Okay, that's the process. So we have developed the story, we have outlined for flow, we have written for clarity and concision, and we have packaged for publication. If you want to start using this process with your co-authors, I highly suggest scheduling a meeting before you start the process where you communicate the process as I just did to you. Maybe refer them to this podcast episode. And yeah, just suggest, hey, do you want to try a more efficient way to collaborate on this paper? Do we all agree that this is a good process that we want to give a go? Like, let's try it out. Um, and then you, as the lead author, should take the lead to guide them through the process. You are responsible for getting people back on track if they deviate from the process, and just um yeah, have a little bit of compassion as well that you're all doing this for the first time potentially. So this is hard for everyone, and the first time won't go like super smooth. And just like go in with the understanding that it will become easier the longer um you do this, or the more often you do this, I should say. Um, all right. Yeah, this is I love this process. If I may say so myself, it has worked so well for our members who follow this process, they have managed to write research papers in 8 weeks or less using it, and they're actually enjoying the process. So I think this is super important as well. And I haven't mentioned this so much at the start, but I think there's so many negative feelings associated with writing papers. And I think there's a way to actually make it more enjoyable. Writing is a beautiful thing. It can be so fulfilling doing this type of deep work. And I think this is a process that really yeah, really enables you to get some of that enjoyment. Now, if you've become curious and you want to learn more about the Researchers Writing Academy, where you get like all our support in the process, all the details of the process, I highly recommend our free training, which is available under researcherswritingpodcast.com/free. We will also put the link in the show notes, of course. And yeah, that free training is a very good first step. If you're thinking, oh, maybe the Researchers Writing Academy is for me, maybe this is something I want to participate in. All right, let's get to our listener question. Um, our listener question today is, what do you do when you are not motivated to write? Um, And this is a question I really like. Of course, I don't like when we're not feeling motivated, but it's something I've been thinking about recently a lot, and where I think I've changed my stance on a little bit. So that's always exciting. Um, it's also a question actually that has been asked in our community before. In the Researchers Writing Academy, we do have a community on Circle where yeah, every member can ask questions, and it's really beautiful seeing when members help each other. Um, and I want to summarize, I want to give you some of the tips that actually our community gave that member. And I also want to give you my take on this question. Um, so, of course, when writing is feeling good, when everything is going well, when we feel like, we're progressing well, we're feeling we're productive, making good progress, being a little bit proud of what we've written, um, then we're just feeling good, and we're on a roll, and writing is just feeling good. Now, when the converse is true, right? When we're not quite sure, is what we're doing the right thing to do? Do we just not have the energy? Are other things going on? And writing is just like, oh, we just cannot be bothered to write. What do we do? Um, and the tips from our community were, well, um, go for a walk. Like that was the biggest too. Like maybe you just need some time away from your computer, away from your office or wherever you normally write. You need some nature, you need some movement. Actually, this is research has shown how good walks are for like idea creation. And I think like for me, like I love going for walks. I go for them every day, partly because I have a dog. Maybe at some point you'll see her in the background. She's here with me today. Um, but yeah, going for walks, the most beautiful thing, the best thing to clear your head. So if you can go somewhere for like, I don't know, half an hour, whatever you can fit in. Um, Another suggestion is maybe a change of scenery for your writing. So instead of if you normally like write from your office or you normally write from your home office, you normally write from your couch, I don't know, you would go somewhere else. Like maybe you go to a cafe, maybe go to a library. Just this like change of scenery, I think works wonders sometimes on our brain because we get out of like the routine, right? The thing our brain experiences every day, and we're like, we get out of this autopilot and we get new information for our brain, like new things that we are seeing, that we're surrounding ourselves with, and that might like get you the spark. Um, yeah, the spark that you need. The other tip from our community was try a 25-minute Pomodoro. I don't know if you know the Pomodoro technique. That's when you set a timer for 25 minutes, you break for 5, you set a timer for 25, break for 5, and you like go through in these chunks. And I think that's super smart. Setting like a rather short time, giving yourself a rather short time and being like, okay, let's try. Let's try to get things done. Like let's just try to get into this project in the 25 minutes. And if we see, okay, now it just doesn't work. I've given it 25 minutes. I've tried. I've thought of things. It doesn't work. We're not getting there today. Then just like call it a day and be like, okay, no, today's not the day to do this. And I think this is such a nice way of doing it because I think and I'm coming to this realization pretty late, but variations and motivations are completely normal. Like we can't always be super motivated, even for tasks we like. Like even when you like writing normally and you get excited by writing papers, it's totally normal that there is like a point where you're like, oh yeah, no, today I'm not feeling motivated. And actually, what I really highly recommend is looking at, okay, why am I not motivated? Why am I not motivated? Trying to understand where the lack of motivation is coming from. Um, for me, I've realized this after a longer holiday, a longer vacation. I'm like, I really take some time to get back into things. Normally the first day after I'm back, and I experienced it this summer when I came back from a 2 week summer break. The first few days, I was not motivated. And this is very rare for me, and I think this is why it like always shooks me a little bit, like makes me a little bit worried, and it's also very uncomfortable for me. Um, but I just because I manage, I guess that's the flip side of managing unplugging so well. Um, After a time off. I, I need to get back into it. And I have understood this through reflection. And I've also understood, I've tried to understand through reflection, okay, what helps me get back into it? And for me, that's meetings with my team. Like just chatting about the business again, chatting about yeah, what's going on, about problems, about anything, brainstorming things, that makes me excited again. But I do need this social component. And I'm otherwise an introvert or more introverted than extroverted, but I do need the social component. Um, so this is why trying to understand where it's coming from actually really helps. Um, Also, another reason could be that you're not feeling good about your writing project, or you have a conflict with your co-author, perhaps. Like these type of negative emotions, they really affect our motivation. And once we understand, okay, this is why I'm not motivated, I think then we can change um, something about it. Um, and the thing that, yeah, I have I have come to more recently is, and I learned this from a friend of mine who has ADHD, who cannot, who just cannot do things when she doesn't feel motivated, and who's really following her energy. And I've learned from her actually that this is a really good way of doing things. Like for me, this works really well to also just honor when I'm not feeling motivated. If I don't really, really have to do something, but if there's a deadline, I usually actually am more motivated. So then I kind of manage to push myself most of the time. But when I'm really not motivated, I also just let myself to be not motivated to do that task for a bit. And maybe that's the case for you. Like if you're not motivated, feeling motivated to write, then maybe right now is not the time where you produce your best work. Like maybe tomorrow is that time, or maybe next week is that time, and maybe in 2 weeks is that time. And if you're really feeling like doing something else and you can afford to do something else, then maybe follow your flow, like follow whatever your motivation is telling you. It's not always possible, of course. If you can do that, though, yeah, why not use that privilege? And this is like my latest realization. So maybe this was helpful. Maybe, yeah, me answering this listener question gave you some new insights. Maybe, yeah, the whole journal publication formula, this like streamlined process to write papers time efficiently, gave you some new takeaways. I'd love to hear what your takeaway is from this episode. I always recommend after you listen to one of these episodes, well, think like, what am I taking away? What is the one thing that I really want to remember? And what's the thing you want to try out? Like, which of the things that I've mentioned is something where you're thinking, oh yeah, this is something I wanna try out. So do let me know. You can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram and Twitter, or X. And yeah, let me know. I would I would love to hear what your takeaways are. All right. See you for the next episode. Bye. If you would like to submit a question for me to answer on the podcast, please head to researcherswritingpodcast.com/question. That's researcherswritingpodcast in one word.com/question. And if you enjoyed this podcast episode, it would really mean the world to me if you could review it in your favorite platform, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whichever app you're using. The more reviews a show has, the more likely it will be shown to others who are looking for podcasts in the academic writing space. So thank you.